The ongoing ethnic violence in Myanmar, also known as Burma, caused 13,000 ethnic Muslims, the Rohingya, to flee the country in 2012 alone, an exodus that resulted in 485 known deaths. And yet most people don't know a thing about any of it. That changed on Sunday when the hacktivist collective Anonymous launched Operation Rohingya to bring awareness to what some are calling a hidden genocide. Now here's a screenshot of Trends Map. This shows how this is Trends Map, showing how widespread the hashtag became. But it also is important to note how quickly it dissipated. Right here, this is using Topsy Analytics. You'll see the drop-off immediately on March 25th. So the question then is how the hashtag Rohingya now might make a difference for the Rohingya people at all, now or in the future. To discuss the situation in Myanmar, we're joined by Chan Mi Kine, a journalist based in Singapore, Matthew Smith, a researcher at Human Rights Watch, Ramzy Baroud, a Palestinian-American journalist who's written about Myanmar, and Sophie Ansel, a journalist who's been reporting on Myanmar since 2006. I want to start by playing part of the video Anonymous also released on Sunday.
Over the past few months, thousands of Rohingya have been encouraged onto boats and sent out to sea with not enough food or fuel, and left there to die. Many boats were attacked and sunk, with women and children on board. Already the violence in Burma has spread beyond the Rohingya to include all Muslims, with warm-ups to the anticipated massacre taking place against Burmese Muslims in Myektila, Naypyidaw and Yangon. Dead and burning bodies, including children, are now lying in the streets. While the United States claims to defend human rights, their record clearly reflects a government that will only intercede when their business interests are threatened.
So Sophie, you saw that Anonymous video, I'm sure, and you saw the hashtag over the weekend. The question then is, who are the Rohingya and why does the world not know about them?
The Rohingya is an ethnicity of Myanmar. It was actually, they are Muslim and they are based in Arakan state in west of Burma. And they didn't, they were deprived from their nationality in 1982. And from there, it was impossible to say the word Rohingya in Myanmar. It's like a big taboo. You cannot say Rohingya because anybody in Myanmar will tell you Rohingya don't exist. They have been kept in some villages in Arakan state where they could not get married, they could not leave their villages, and they were suffering really terrible oppression.
And Sophie, I just want to, kind of put this into context chronologically. In May of last year, there was a campaign of violence, as it's been described, by the Arakanese against the Rohingya. What exactly are they doing to the Rohingya people that's causing them to flee?
You mean before May 2012?
And in May, yes.
Yeah. So the Rohingya in Arakan states, they are always taxed. They cannot. They have very bad access to education. They are often used as slaves. They are confiscated always their land or their house. They are arbitrarily arrested all the time. So there is a lot of Rohingya also who are in prison because they get married with a woman or a man that the community agree to that they marry, but they have not get the rights from the authorities, so they are put in jail. So a lot of Rohingya are in this situation. Actually, they cannot do anything. They cannot get married. They cannot have a life, and they are the most persecuted ethnicity in the world. And the thing is, I think Arakan state is a state that is very wants to be more autonomous. So a way I think for the government to try to lower the tension between the government and the Arakanese Buddhists was to keep a common enemy, which was those people that you keep in some villages that they cannot get away. And when I went to Arakan state in last April, and I could, after I went there in 2006, and then I came back in 2012, and I could see the it was more and more violent. The way the Rohingya were treated in Sittwe, it was really, really bad. And you could feel the tension was there, and you could feel something was really, really tense. And I met some of my Buddhist friends also who were released from the 2007 suffering. But the thing, as soon as the main idea for the Arakanese at that time was they want to get rid of the Muslim. I mean, of course,
right.
Hopefully not all of Arakanese.
Of course, and Sophie, I want to stop you there because Ramzy, let's try and step back for a second. And people are probably, I would assume, learning about this for the first time. And I have to ask you, as a veteran journalist, Sophie there just described the Rohingya as the most persecuted people in the world. And I know you've covered Southeast Asia for years now. Why do you think, even though you've just recently started covering Myanmar, why do you think that the whole world doesn't know about this? And what compelled you to cover it?
Well, because the suffering of any group of people, any collective, whether in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, in Africa, anywhere else, the media focuses on issues that are of certain geopolitical importance, of certain economic outcomes that may or may not matter. Frankly and sadly, the Rohingyas do not have any political backbone. They don't have organized groups. They don't have major benefactors in Western countries or anywhere else for that matter. There are about 800,000 of them, mostly in Arakan state, but there's about 3 million Muslims in the entire country of 60 millions of Burma. And the conflict is now spreading beyond the Rohingyas to other non-Rohingya Muslim groups. And I think this is one of the reasons of why we are beginning to talk about them, because now we are talking about an issue of parameters that are growing beyond Burma. The media doesn't care a great deal because now we are being told that democracy is kind of taking roots in Burma. Western companies, big corporations, are now vying for power and influence and resources. They are trying to balance out the Chinese and such. And the result is nobody wants to talk about these irritants, little irritants, as in 1 million people being treated, I don't want to say like animals, frankly, because I don't think anybody would treat animals in such a way as to send people on floating anything. They are showing up at the shores of Thailand, of Malaysia, of Indonesia, of Bangladesh. They are everywhere, running away for their lives, being separated from their families, being hunted down in the jungle. I mean, this is completely unacceptable. But who wants to talk about this at a time that we are supposedly celebrating the rising democracy in Burma, which is now extending bridges of friendship and such with Western countries?
Well, Ramzy, I appreciate you making that passionate plea because I would agree with you. But at HuffPost Live, we want to talk about it, and that's why you're here. And you brought up China, and you brought up the fact that the media is not talking about this. I want to just draw your attention to this headline from 2009. This is the New York Times, really pointing to what you're saying. China fails to prevent Myanmar's ethnic clashes. Now, the term used there, ethnic clashes, is perhaps the one that we're most familiar with when the media does choose to cover this or care about this. A lot of other people on the ground, though, experts, are calling this not an ethnic clash, but ethnic cleansing. Al-Jazeera and other international media organizations have even called it, as you did, I think, a genocide. Why do you think that disconnect exists? And is it, in fact, a genocide and ethnic cleansing?
I think it's very much that. I mean, if we look at the numbers, I mean, we know of hundreds of people who are being killed because their bodies might show up on some boat, some rickety boat somewhere in Thailand. That's how we keep track of numbers. But many people are lost at sea. Many people, we don't know what happened to them. They are not citizens. They are denied citizenship in their own country. I must say here that I do very much appreciate what the Huffington Post is doing, what the Anonymous, I'm going to take a risk and say I do appreciate what Anonymous have done in that particular video, and also what Al-Jazeera have done. The New York Times and other papers have this kind of once-in-a-while coverage of the situation, and when they do, they link it to something else that may or may not matter. Let's say to Washington and their ability, their attempt at reaching out and investing in Burma.
Right.
So it's very selective covering. We haven't seen the kind of coverage that we would expect when, as we said, a genocide is underway, whether in Darfur or in Burma.
Right, and Matthew, that's where I think we can come to you to just kind of paint for us what is exactly happening. We know human rights violations are occurring, people are being forced to flee, villages are being burnt, but what are the most egregious human rights violations that are really making this an urgent matter, in your opinion?
Yeah, thanks. We've documented what is essentially a statewide campaign of violence and abuse in this part of Burma or Myanmar, called Arakan State. Beginning back in June, as mentioned a moment ago, violence started really ostensibly from a series of violent incidents, and then it really just escalated. So you have mobs of ethnic Arakanese citizens descending on Rohingya Muslim villages, burning the villages down and committing very serious abuses. Now, at the same time, we documented how state security forces, in some cases, stood by and watched as violence was being perpetrated and killings were happening. And in other cases, they participated in those killings. So right now, what you've got is about 125,000 people displaced, living in very squalid IDP camps, internally displaced person camps. And there is a very serious concern that the government is not adequately addressing the right of these people to return to their villages. But beyond that, there's a humanitarian aid crisis unfolding in these camps. The rainy season will be upon Arakan State in May. And when that happens, there's a very strong possibility that waterborne diseases will spread throughout the displaced population if they're not moved to higher ground. And the government has so far been intransigent on that issue.
And Matthew, I don't know if you can see what I'm showing you. I hope you can. These are images that are aerial satellite imagery that was given to us by Human Rights Watch. This is the Yanthe village on 11th of February 2012. Can you just speak to it if you can see it, or if you're familiar with the image, what we're looking at?
I can't see it, no, but I am familiar with the images.
And you know, we see that it says that there are buildings that have been destroyed, but I also understand that part of the issue is that people are not being allowed to leave. Residents are not being allowed to leave, almost that these villages are being guarded. Is that ongoing?
That is still a problem, absolutely. And you know, you can get a sense from those images just how widespread the destruction was and how it really did almost exclusively target the Muslim populations, namely the Rohingya and Kaman Muslim populations of Arakan State. But that's indeed correct. Right now, the Rohingya have always lacked freedom of movement. I think that's important to note. But right now, the displaced Rohingya that are living in these camps or these displacement sites, they are not free to leave. They're not free to move, rather. And this is having a devastating impact on their livelihoods. Because on top of the lack of freedom of movement, adequate humanitarian aid is not reaching them. And it's not reaching them because of decisions that are being made at the government level. So these are not insurmountable problems. These are issues that could be addressed. There's a very competent and ready force of humanitarian aid workers in the country that are ready to deal with these problems, and they just keep facing very serious obstacles by the government.
And Chen, when you hear Matthew describe some of the obstacles, the fact that hundreds of homes are being destroyed and burnt, as we described, we know that they're fleeing anywhere they can flee to, Thailand, Sri Lanka. Putting the media question aside, I know you've lived there for 24 years. Is there something you can share with us about how things have evolved and how urgent the situation is today?
Yeah, but the discussion is very interesting because people here are saying that the international community is not aware of Rohingya, but in Myanmar, like what people are advising out about is like international media is biased towards Rohingya because we cannot simply say that it's like ethnic cleansing or genocide because that is not like how we can address or how we can phrase it. It's not like the Rakhine people, for them, is like they are also being persecuted. They are also being like differentiated. They are also one of the minorities in Myanmar. They are not. There are many ethnics in Myanmar, and they're one of the minorities. So the they thought that they do not have the full right of being a minority there. Then there is another minority group that like kind of like in their land, so they think like it's like it becomes a conflict, and the conflict, the root cause of conflict is that not from the racial or religion cause, but it's started from a crime. So for in Myanmar, the views are mixed, I would say, and it's different from the international community. And for the current recent violence and the violence in last year is, I would say, is different. For Rohingya case, it is more like ethnicity, citizenship right, and the immigration issue. Why
right.
The reason, yeah.
Well, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I just want to clarify. I mean, I understand that you're trying to make a distinction between what we call this, just to be specific and accurate, but isn't it true that these are essentially stateless people, I think is what you're saying. I mean, we know that a discriminatory citizenship law was passed in 1982, I believe, that effectively made the Rohingya, you know, which I think is what they're now estimated to be between 800,000 and 1 million people living in Myanmar, stateless, so that they have absolutely no representation and no security.
Yeah, but the thing is that 1982 law also has some kind of controversy issues in Myanmar, because there is many people are saying it's like, because if we want to change the citizenship law, we still need to have the votes from the whole country, and not just the one country forced Myanmar and we changed the citizenship law and all became citizens. And even when we define the group of Rohingya, there is some issues, because there are many Muslims people living in Arakan since decades ago, but not all, I would say that not all Muslims are Rohingyas, and not they just share.
So you're saying that not all Muslims are Rohingyas, and perhaps vice versa. Okay, but that doesn't change the fact that they're not able to travel between the townships without certain permissions, or even, as we hear, they have to often pay bribes. And I'd love your thoughts on this, Sophie, because I know you're familiar with the matter. But there's also extremely high levels of internally displaced Rohingya, the ones who are unable to travel and flee outside. And this is something, to Ramzy's point, that we've seen in various other situations in the world, in Israel and Palestine, for example. But is she right to kind of say that, you know, to point out those distinctions between Muslims and Rohingyas, and perhaps that a solution isn't just to grant them citizenship, or that's not the first step?
Well, it's complicated, but the thing is, I think the Rohingya issues. I think the Rohingya was the kind of the first step to grow the issue that happened today. And you keep an enemy for a long time. For 50 years, the Rohingya have been kept away from the how do you say, sorry, from the for 50 years, the Rohingya has been kind of the enemy or the black sheep of Myanmar, and you keep them in some villages that will help you to, how do you say, keep them in, yeah, sorry.
No, keep them contained. I mean, I understand what you're trying to say.
And that's how no other ethnicity will know really about Rohingya, because they just know what the rumors are coming from Arakan state about these people who are in some villages, and then they are supposedly, I mean, they are illegals, and there is no Rohingya, and they claim to have a name that is actually the military didn't want to exist. The Arakanis also didn't want to exist, because there is a big nationalism feeling. And so I think the issue is this 1982 law, which is unlawful, which is the first thing that should be looked at, because it was unlawful, and all those people have been deprived of paper. Of course, now they have been put in these camps. They have no more homes. They have no more anything. It's so easy to say that they are illegal migrants, because all their belongings have been taken away, all their papers have been taken away.
Of course. And you're largely saying that it's, decades of these policies, and that's what's led to this point that they're so marginalized and isolated. So then if we look to the future, Chan, for a minute, I want to come back to you and ask you, knowing that Aung San Suu Kyi has been criticized for appearing alongside the Burmese military, as you know, at a military parade. What is the right step, in your opinion, in terms of how to try and bring an end to this conflict, whatever we want to call it? The Norwegian 76 in our comment section saying this: the underlying issue in most conflicts is power and ownership. Religion is the excuse. What do you think needs to happen, Chan?
I would much agree with this comment, because it's like, if like an outsider, it's like just people like rushing to condemn the Buddhists are extremists, they are racist, the Rohingyas are being persecuted. I'm not saying that Rohingyas are not surviving their hardship, that there's many like hardship for their life, but at the same time, the country, the political situation is very, 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 very complex. And many people are criticizing that Aung San Suu Kyi, that they are not, she's not rising up for Rohingya, she is making friends with army, but even for this today army parade, I would like to say that the army founder is her father, and what's so wrong with her to attend the army parade? And I'm not sure about how international community would see this, but for Myanmar citizens, that's the sign of peace between army and the current leader and the opposition.
Yeah, but it's much more complicated than that, and I think there is an attempt here by Chan to reduce the issue to things as, the international community doesn't understand the specificities of Burmese society. I agree, and we cannot rush to judgment. However, we are looking at particular evidence here of genocide underway. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, various groups around the world have documented clear violations and ethnic cleansing going on in that part of the world for years. And we see a democracy icon like Aung San Suu Kyi taking the position that she did today. I do not want to use offensive words on your channel, but it is incredibly disappointing to see that she is a democracy icon, not just for Burmese, but for people around the world. She is a member of the elders group that include Desmond Tutu and many other important people, and she should be held morally accountable to why isn't she able to speak out against what is going on against the Rohingyas.
And Ramzy, just to echo that point, and we can come back to you, Chan, if you want. Matthew, I want to get your thoughts on this. We have a lot of people in our comments section who are familiar with it, perhaps, and some learning for the first time, agreeing with Ramzy in the criticisms of Aung San Suu Kyi. Nadia Joseph, 11 minutes ago, saying it's a shame that someone as prominent as Aung San Suu Kyi has not brought attention to the plight of the Rohingya. Matthew, what do you think needs to happen, and are these criticisms of her correct? Okay, maybe we can go to you, Sophie. It seems we have audio issues with Matthew. Do you think, Sophie, that these criticisms are fair of her?
I think, I think the thing is Aung San Suu Kyi is the voice that the international community listens. So the thing is, with the opening, the supposedly opening of Myanmar, the international community is just is not looking and globally too much at the situation. It's looking mainly at what Aung San Suu Kyi kind of say, because she has a very big aura now internationally.
But Sophie, if she has that, shouldn't she do more to draw attention to the fact that, for example, in January alone, as people are trying to flee Myanmar, at least 1,800 refugees showed up, washed up dead in Thailand in January 2013 alone.
That's why I say that because she has that voice, she has the responsibility of saying things. And because by her silence is very violent to people like the Rohingya, because actually I met some Rohingya, a lot of Rohingya before, and they always they supported Aung San Suu Kyi for a long time, and they were she was the only hope for them as much as she was the only hope for many ethnicities, because Myanmar is not only Burma, it's a lot of ethnicities. So she was the hope, and that's why everybody was supporting her.
Okay.
But the thing is, when the Rohingyas saw she cannot say something about what's going on talking about illegal issues when the whole group is being killed or persecuted is very, very violent silence.
Of course. And Chan, what do you make of Ramzy's criticism of perhaps the way you were framing this, or you know, the way you were downplaying some violence?
I would say that Aung San Suu Kyi is not holding the current power of the government, and even if she speak out about and as the peacemaker or the political figure in Myanmar, I don't think she can stand on one side, because although the whole world is seeing that Rohingyas are being persecuted in Myanmar, the conversation is going on is that there is the clash between two ethnics. So that I do not think she can stand on one side and saying, okay, yes, Rakhine ethnic cleansing and Rohingya. I do not think that would make her position better.
But Chan, let me just ask you this, though. You know, given the platform that she has and given the attention that she can garner, if it's true that, you know, as we know from these human rights agencies and other reports, that there have been severe restrictions on marriage, on the movement of the Rohingya Muslims, the fact that so many are fleeing, that their villages are being burned, it's not about taking sides, but can't she draw attention to the violence and the destruction without taking sides?
Even if she draw attention to the Rohingya, I do think that the action taker should be the government. And the investigation that was going on hasn't been reported yet, and they would say that they will report at the end of this month about the investigation in last year, June and October. So even if she draw attention, if government has no intention to do anything transparent, I do not think that will be effective.
All right, and Ramzy, do you think that that's a fair defense there by Chan, that because it's really the impetus should be, the burden should be on the government, not her?
Not at all. I don't think it's fair at all. In fact, I think it's an apology, basically, for a position that should have been very, very obvious. And I think, and let me just add this, that there are certain conflicts in the world where we cannot stand on the sideline and just say we are not going to get involved. When people go through what they did in Sudan and Syria and South Africa, in the history of slavery in America, there are certain moral stances that cannot or do not allow for a middle position or for anybody to be neutral. If there's any conflict that is raging on right now anywhere in the world that requires that we are absolutely morally clear on the injustice of it, it is this conflict. And therefore, I think it is again disappointing that an icon of democracy has taken on such a position. And it's sad to hear what Sophie has said, that the Rohingyas were expecting from Aung San Suu Kyi to be taking on a position in their favor, and she hasn't. What a disappointment for those people who are left defenseless in the face of this ongoing genocide.
All right, well, Chan, Ramzy, Sophie, and Matthew, I just want to thank you for joining us and for taking the time, Chan, especially, I know it's very late in Singapore where you are, to bring attention to this issue. And I think, you know, we should wrap by saying, as we showed that opening trends map of the hashtag Rohingya Now, just over the weekend, a few days ago, all over the world, discussions happening around it online. If you take a look at my screen, I just plugged it in now. As you can see, just one hashtag appearing in Europe where the conversation is alive. And I do want to end this with this comment from etc., who says, look at that, learn something every day from HPL. I had no idea this was happening. I learned a lot from this conversation as well, and we hope to have many more conversations about this topic. Ramzy, again, Chan, Sophie, Matthew, thank you so much. The conversation, as you know, this conversation and many others continue at HuffPost Live.